If you thought the ID.3 was going to be VW's only electric offering, then I've got news for you. There's going to be a whole family of electric VWs wearing the ID badge arriving over the next 5 years. From saloons to camper vans and beach buggies, ID is here to stay. And the latest one to arrive less than a year after the ID.3 is the ID.4. But this is a big car for VW because unlike the ID.3, it's going to be sold all over the world and not just in Europe. So before I tell you if this car is a second tricky album for VW or not, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, switch on those notifications and do leave a comment in the comments below. Well, the first thing to say is the ID.4 is a small, car-like SUV. What car people and marketing types would call a crossover. Now, if you've been watching this channel recently, you'll know that there's rather a lot of these arriving in 2021. One of which is ID.4's sister car, the Skoda Enyaq. And as we know from recent years, the Skoda version of any new VW gives the mother brand a serious run for its money. Now, while the Skoda looks quite flamboyant and the Tesla Model Y looks very Tesla-ish, the ID.4 manages to pull off the same trick as the ID.3 in that it looks a little bit futuristic but also conservative at the same time in the way that we Brits like our Volkswagens to be. In here, well, it will look pretty familiar if you have driven or sat in an ID.3 because the tech and this sort of dashboard function is basically just lifted out of that car. And I do think it looks pretty cool. I really like it visually. However, as with the ID.3, it does feel a little bit cost conscious in places. VW have definitely scrimped on some of the quality materials in here. So you've got the central touchscreen here and also a secondary screen here in front of the steering wheel. And what's really cool is this, is you adjust the steering wheel, which has plenty of reach and rake. That moves with it, so it's constantly in your eye line, which I like. I also like the fact that the gear selector is just this little sort of rotary just here. It's very BMW i3-ish. So this main screen, it's really functional, relatively easy to use. But you will need to spend a bit of time familiarising yourself and getting used to the tech, but it's pretty quick to learn. You can swipe through it. It just looks a bit like your smartphone, doesn't it? And just like a smartphone, you can customise it and move icons around. One thing that I'm not too keen on, though, is the fact that you've got to kind of fiddle around in here to be able to adjust the climate control, which when you're on the move, I find a bit irritating. There are some buttons down here as well, but I just prefer physical buttons for that. I think it's just one of those things that can be quite distracting when you're driving. I think what's interesting though about the interior with the ID.4 is that I've recently spent quite a bit of time in the VW Golf 8, the latest Golf, and actually it's really surprising how dated that interior feels when I get into an ID.4. I think they have nailed it in here. It's modern, it's sleek, it looks great. It's just a nice place to be. The ID.3 has had a few software issues along the way, but all ID.4s delivered in the UK do have the latest 2.1 software version and will be capable of future over-the-air updates. I've got to confess though that I have had a few glitches with the system in the ID.4 I've driven, and it crashed a couple of times. Into the back. And it's very roomy, and I really do mean roomy. The whole car is incredibly spacious with lots of really ingenious storage options, but it's in the back here that you actually feel it the most. It's actually really nice and bright and light. Width is great. You've got Isofix child seat points on the two outside seats. You're not going to get 3 child seats across here, but you would fit 3 adults, and of course being electric there's no transmission tunnel down here to take away from that all-important legroom. The one thing I would say though is that the word cost conscious springs to mind again. You know, some of the plastics just aren't as nice as you want them to be in a Volkswagen. I mean, perhaps they think that people don't actually sit in the back of cars in showrooms when they go to experience them. Oh, come on, you do? Don't you? Well, you should. But there is more space than in a Tesla Model Y and lots more headroom than a Ford Mustang Mach-E. In the boot, there are 543 litres with the seats up, which is big, and more actually than a BMW iX3. Fold them down and you get 1600 litres. Doesn't mean much that, does it? But it will do when I tell you that that is more than you'd get in the biggest Volvo estate. And it is a good job that the boot is so large, because you don't get a front boot or fruit or frunk, whatever you prefer to call it. And I think that's a shame. There is some space there, so perhaps it was just a bit of cost cutting again and they didn't put one in. You do, however, get something which is as rare as hen's teeth when it comes to electric cars: towing capability. The ID.4 can in fact tow up to 1,000 kilograms, which is pretty handy. For now, the only ID.4 you can order is the first edition, but less expensive models will arrive during 2021. And as a thank you to customers who splashed their cash first, VW has put every single bell and whistle on the first edition. And at just under £38,000 after the government plug-in car grant, it actually makes this pretty good value for money. It's only a few £100s more than an entry-level Mustang Mach-E, for instance. Now, the first edition also has the big battery, which is the 77 kilowatt-hour one with a 202 brake horsepower electric motor. 52 kilowatt-hour batteries with 146 and 168 brake horsepower will be arriving later in 2021. But I'm quite a fan of the big battery. You get plenty of power, it's nice smooth delivery. Look, you don't get the surge of power that you get with a Model Y, and it doesn't have the sporty feel that you get, say, with a Mach-E, but it definitely has enough punch. Now, you sit a bit higher up than in the ID.3, and that obviously helps with visibility. But there's just a more comfortable feeling, I think, to the way the ID.4 drives, and that's really true when you compare it to the Mach-E as well, which definitely has a harsher ride. The ID.4 is just a pleasant, quiet, unassuming car to drive. Perfect family SUV transport then. What might not be quite so perfect though is the range. This top spec 77 kilowatt hour has a WLTP rated range of 310 miles, and it has 125 kilowatt onboard charging fitted as standard. And it should be doing around 4 miles per kilowatt hour, but it just doesn't achieve that. My average figure on a mixture of roads is around 3 miles per kilowatt hour. Take it for a run on the motorway and you'll see that drop even lower to 2.7, giving it a range of 230 miles. It's just not great, is it? But having said that, the lower models, which will be capable of around 216 miles, may be more capable of that claim figure because they will be lighter, and we will of course report back on that when we've driven them. Now, one thing that helps with range is regenerative braking, and if you're not sure what that is, here comes a quick explainer. A car creates loads of kinetic energy when it's moving, and this energy flows from the batteries to the motor, turning the wheels and providing you with the kinetic energy you need to move. When you stop and hit the brakes, the process goes into reverse, and electronic circuits cut the power to the motors. Now your kinetic energy and momentum makes the wheels turn the motors. So the motors work like generators and start producing electricity instead of consuming it. It's smart, isn't it? Now, whilst there are still friction brakes, of course, this regeneration can give you true one-pedal driving with your electric car. Take your foot off the accelerator and it starts to slow down. But VW have gone for a different approach with the ID.4, and they've opted for a coasting mode instead. So the car automatically starts in its D mode, and when you release the accelerator, instead of slowing down, the car just coasts. You'll still get regenerative braking when you press the brake pedal, and you also have the option of using a B mode, which gives you heavier regen, but it's just not as strong as in other electric cars, again, cars like the Mach-E. And I don't think you can really experience true one-pedal driving, which is something I really like. And if you do have to hit the brakes to stop a bit faster, like this, the they do need a bit of a shove. They haven't got quite the bite that you'd expect, particularly in wet conditions like this. Let's give that one a go again. Nah, it's not. You really do need to be pretty forceful with them. Another thing I like is that according to the expert crystal ball gazers who predict values for finance companies, in this case CAP HPI, the ID.4 holds its value very well. Much better than rivals like the Ford Mustang Mach-E, for example. So let's cut to the chase. Should you buy an ID.4? Well, it does have a lot going for it. It's spacious, got a really lovely interior, it's a very comfortable car, and it's nice and easy to drive. Not so sure about the efficiency though. But here's a fact for you. There are more new electric cars going on sale in 2021 than went on sale in the last decade. So I actually think it would be madness to part with your money for an ID.4 right now until we can tell you exactly what the Skoda Enyaq is like. And funnily enough, we're driving it in just a few weeks' time. Then I'll be able to tell you whether you should buy one or not. If you're after a practical electric car, then take a look at our detailed reviews of the Mach-E, the Citroën EC4, and also our head-to-head with the Mach-E and the ID.4, which is coming to the channel soon. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn those notifications on.